Is there just tell us what your thoughts are on that.
I don't really have a strong opinion on it, to be quite honest.
Right.
If somebody wants to do whatever, I have no. If whatever somebody wants to do with them, I don't care.
I mean, I can give a couple of thoughts on it. Well, not LGBT, but certainly on transgenderism, if we call it that.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be recently a lot of stuff in the media, documentaries of people having sex changes, and they seem to be selling the positives of having a sex change. People born in the wrong bodies, the documentaries are clearly, they're being made, in my opinion, to encourage people to think about getting a sex change.
Okay.
It's rather than encouraging people to not have a sex change and live with the body that they were born with, they're definitely promoting it, right?
Okay.
I can see that. There was a documentary about a child who they were
he's quite young. I think I saw
very
that.
young. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong for anyone to make a decision to change their sex, right? That's up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But by encouraging it in the way that they are, right, you can spend tens of thousands of pounds on those types of operations, and it seems to me that I think they're trying to create an industry, right? Which would, let's say you took just 5% of every person who thinks they're born in the wrong body, and you encourage 5% to go for the full set of operations, you're talking probably $1 billion, if not $1 trillion business, right? Now, I read one story where the parents were going to pay for their child to have this done. So what that does, in creating another massive turnover industry with a huge turnover, it means that those parents probably have to stay and work for an extra 10 years. So in other words, it's adding to the consumerist materialism economy. In other words, it's creating more needs that require pound notes to pay for it, rather than encouraging people to be at one with the body they were born with. Now, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong to have a sex change. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they're pushing people into it, I think, for consumerist materialism motives. That's my opinion on it.
I think people spend far too much time caring about, what people do with their genitals. If it makes no difference to me what you do with them. The France shooting happened last night. Okay. This morning I saw 5 articles, complete articles, that have figured it out already. It's
this is the Paris terrorist attacks.
Yeah, we don't know what the death toll is yet. How on earth could you have figured it out? Unless you were there in Paris. I mean, I'm assuming that you're seeing the very limited thing. But this is the point, this self-aggrandizement, this, I was so clever to think of this first. The problem with that, right, okay, is the wish becomes father of the thought. If you're starting to promote a theory before all the evidence has come in, then essentially you're going to fit the evidence. You do what's called colouring the narrative. So if you just say, I'll say this right, okay, if you figured it out in 5 minutes, you're wrong. You're almost certainly wrong, because there's no physical way that you could have got all the component pieces and all the different angles to look at it in anything that could be considered rational. What you're going to do is to say, is put the wish is the father of the thought. There's a brilliant quote here, right, okay, that comes from True Detective, which was a great series. I actually prefer the second series, but I'm a bit weird. It says, do you have a chapter in one of those books on jumping to conclusions? You attach an assumption to a piece of evidence and you start to bend the narrative to support it, and you prejudice yourself. And so you get all these mental gymnastics where basically, you're saying, well, I know it's this, so this evidence must fit into this category. And that's not the way to do research. The other thing is, as well, is, okay, we get this thing called, like, where people are speculating on people's actions, either in photos or like, oh, I wouldn't have reacted like that. Oh, well, good, because you know what that is? That's irrelevant. A, that's not you, and B, you don't know how you would react in that circumstance because you've never been in that situation. What you might be doing is you might be going, well, in the films they don't act like that. There's an important psychological thing when you're examining somebody's actions. When you come from a psychologist's perspective, it's called process and praxis. Okay, and this is about explaining people's actions. I'll give you an example. It's from Red Dwarf. Crichton, the robot from Red Dwarf, right, okay? He gets Captain Hollister and his 3 commanding people, and he says, I've got something that I really need to tell you. and he takes them to the toilet, and he makes them all sit on the toilet, and then he tells them what he's got to tell them. That's mad, yeah? The process of making people sit on the toilet whilst you talk to them is mad. The praxis, the contextual understanding of why he's done that, perfectly sane. Why have you done that? Well, have you heard the expression, imagine somebody, you're doing a speech, imagine they're all sat on the toilet. Well, what he's doing is he's taking that to its logical conclusion. So basically, by putting them on the toilet, it gives him the courage to speak to them as equals. So the praxis, praxis, is completely rational and logical. There's no way you could understand that praxis just by looking at it from an exterior point.
Right.
So this is the point, again, you're getting people putting their own ideas onto positions, onto pieces of evidence. And again, I think you're getting a lot of people...
Just to touch on the Paris incidents and what we were talking about, drawing very quick conclusions as to what may or may not have happened. We were discussing this before the show, that I believe it's impossible to work out what really happened by looking at mainstream media coverage.
Yep.
Firstly, because they operate to an agenda, and their version of the story may have been written before the events occurred,
Yep.
right? And so what people do who don't accept that first position, they look for clues in the mainstream that have slipped through the net.
Clues for what?
Well, clues for what the truth is.
Yeah, but this is the point. If you've decided what the truth is before you've even started looking for those clues, you're backwards.
But I would argue that it's impossible just looking at mainstream to find any clues, because I suspect they actually plant fake clues in there.
This is what I was going to say. Let's take it as read that, we've got to remember the internet's quite new, relatively as well. You had things like, say, Columbine and whatnot, okay, where quite soon, with the aspects of the internet, people started sharing information, this doesn't add up, this doesn't add up, this doesn't add up. So they know that every time there's an incident, people are going to be looking at it. Well, we know that the 6 companies own the media and stuff like that. So what's the best way to stifle investigation? Well, you could, I'm not saying that this has happened, present information in such a way that it leads people to a particular explanation or an avenue. Quite, innocently, basically by stacking the evidence, you could manipulate people into a sort of red herring path.
So they've got a narrative A, which is the main story that 90% of people will believe, and then in certain subtle ways there's another narrative that people are being led to, people who they know don't trust the mainstream media, so they're being led down the garden path. And the truth is
some
somewhere
option,
somewhere
that
else.
nobody's investigating because we're looking at these clues or these seeming clues and such like that.
All right, Neil, we'll discuss more after this break. Welcome back. I'm talking to Neil Sanders about social media. Now, I think we mentioned in the first program, Neil, that it's possible that the whole concept of Facebook is being steered by the CIA or some other shady group, and they know exactly what they're doing by making people exhibit all of these quite ugly traits on the internet, make them believe in certain things that aren't true, what have you. So the whole thing is some sort of manipulation. And I think you actually compared it to the CIA's introduction of LSD. Now this might sound a bit of a crazy concept, but I'm sure Neil's going to explain this in quite simple terms, just because not everyone will be aware that the LSD was actually introduced by the CIA. So just start by telling the viewers why the CIA would introduce LSD in the 1960s to the general public. What was that about first?
Well, the theory, which is supported by people like Dave McGowan and John Potash's new book, which is very good, like how drugs are used against us, seem to highlight that essentially the LSD exposure, and I'm sure I talked about this previously, all the main sort of players, the doctors involved and the celebrity promoters of LSD and such like that, seem to have intimate connections to the CIA. And the theory is that basically LSD was used to neutralize student activism, anti-war movement, racial equality movements and stuff like that, but in a number of ways. A, by basically getting people stoned on LSD so that either they're not in the mood to do this, or there's some argument that basically repeated LSD use could have impacted on them certainly. I don't know whether that's true or not, but the other way, which we talked about on the last program, is the use of drugs, or the connection and the tainting of a person with drugs.
With criminality.
Yeah, basically, it's the prohibition thing that we talked about with Jolly West and stuff like that. Because essentially, if you're considered by the mainstream to be one of these long-haired, lank, drug-taking hippie types, I'm not listening to you. Okay, you're certainly not going to get on the news or whatever, or button down America's not going to pay you any mind, are you? And I just wonder if a similar thing, in the way that sort of LSD was used to sort of destroy grassroots activism and sort of get it chasing its own tail, I wonder if the befuddlement that's caused by this is sort of is purposeful. Because essentially all you're doing is you're getting people arguing backwards and forwards. You're getting this concept of slacktivism, which is basically, people got up, take that, New World Order, right, back to Call of Duty.
Because somebody who doesn't have powerful media organisations at their fingertips, who is at the grassroots level, who wants to start being political or starting a movement of some kind, they are going to turn to Facebook in order to spread their message.
And it can be fabulous. As I said, this is it's just a tool. You can get like-minded people. You can arrange groups. You can promote important and vital ideas and stuff like that. But what you can also do is you can seem to be doing a lot of good, but you're basically talking to the same 20 people. Do you know what I mean? So basically, and particularly when we look at the studies who implemented the money, the study from 2012 where they're basically concerned with spreading emotional contagion, spreading hysteria and stuff like that, you just wonder whether it gives you the impression that you're achieving and doing more than is actually tangibly doing anything, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
it's keeping you in a box, quite a small box, but to you, that box is huge. You think you're being more effective than you really are.
Yeah, and so I just want to reiterate again that this is not the user's fault. This is the mechanism. I think that the mechanism has been very, very cleverly designed in order to encourage these traits in people. Or if it hasn't been set up like that, well then very soon after it, people must have realised, hang on, it encourages this behaviour, it encourages this behaviour, it encourages this behaviour, because people know how people react psychologically. Yeah. People know how to press buttons and get people riled up. People know how to get people angry about this so they don't look at the real issue. Yeah. That's UK politics. I mean,
one thing I've noticed whenever I log onto Facebook, I seem to get, it's like, the program You've Been Framed, where people they're bumping into things and falling off ladders or whatever. It's like an X-rated version of that, like people falling off roofs on patios or driving their car into a wall.
Yeah.
And it's these sort of a bit sick but morbid curiosity type stuff seems to find its way onto Facebook. I don't know whether you've got a theory on that.
Can you imagine if you posted that through someone's letterbox?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
They would ring the police, wouldn't they?
But it's acceptable behaviour on Facebook. But this is entirely my point. Okay, the nature of how people act and behave is changed by the medium that they're in, and whether it's by design or by happy coincidence, all of the circumstances that this type of medium presents tend to encourage and promote the worst types of behaviour.
Yeah. And you would argue that that's possibly deliberate in order to dumb down society? Or?
Very possibly.
Right.
Or just to cause a distraction.
Yes.
Just, whilst people are arguing on Facebook, who cares?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to, or from a perspective of, say, an elitist, you argue as much as you want. Okay, I don't care. Whilst you're arguing with each other, I'm putting my feet up over here.
Yeah. So if we can just discuss a little bit outside of Facebook before we finish, because if we go back 10 or 15 years, the internet was more a collection of websites which you would access through a search engine. Now I think Google has become a bit like Facebook. It's the only search engine site that people use, just as Facebook is the only social media website people use. So in that regard, the internet has got smaller, because you've got less choice, or people exercise less choice.
The illusion of choice is there, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, one thing that I read, and I've said it in one of my talks, is that if you look at all hits on websites, 95% of them come from page one of Google.
Yeah.
So and page one of Google pretty much only promotes corporate sources,
Which depends
like BBC, Telegraph, Daily Mail.
You can get on the front page, but you'll have to pay.
Well, in an advert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can use the SEO and stuff and get on it.
I suspect the algorithm will do certain people favours who pay money or what have you.
This is my point exactly. If you've got the money, you can be the most popular thing.
Now, so in that regard, the internet has become more limited and narrow, if you like, because you've got Facebook and Google, which is the two main sites that people will use, maybe perhaps YouTube. Whereas, as I said, 15 years ago, I think there was a broader use of different websites.
Yeah, there was different search engines. Certainly, there was Mama and Lycos and all these different ones.
Which there still are other search engines, but
they just don't get a look in.
But they return the same results as Google.
Well, it's become an expression, hasn't it? Google it.
Which is putting all your faith into one corporation, which is very dangerous.
Yeah.
But do you think that what would you recommend then? Would you say, look, come off Facebook and start doing research into certain websites?
No.
Or what would you tell people to?
You don't have to come off Facebook.
How would they change their internet usage then?
If Facebook is your only social outlet, that's a problem. If Facebook is the only way that you're gaining any...
then you're a sad...
If it's the only way that basically you're getting any sort of positive feeling about yourself, it's a problem. Right. Okay. Now, I appreciate that some people might be in a situation where that's the only outlet they've got. Don't let it be. Use it for what it's supposed to be. Contacting people and to get you a bit of a boost so that you can get out and get a real social life, basically.
All right, then, Neil. Well, just give us the name of your website, because this is it's one aspect that it's not covered in your books, is it? The social media, is it covered in this one a bit?
A little bit, tiny bit, but this is sort of more observations that I've got what's sat at home seething. Right.
But predominantly Neil's books. Well, the first one is about direct forms of mind control. I.e., hypnosis, psychotronics, all kinds of nefarious stuff that various groups have got up to control people's minds, and the other one covers how the media and marketing controls people's minds. But just give us your website address.
It's neilsandersmindcontrol.com.
All right.
And you can get the books on there. And so again, I'm not an idiot. Of course, I use social media. If you want to have that's a good way of getting in contact with me and asking me a question or whatever. I'm not suggesting that people, abandon the internet or anything like that. I'm just saying take what you get off there with a pinch of salt. Like the internet is just like I'll say it again. It's like a library. It's got information in there. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's nonsense. Okay, that's it. People put too much importance on these things.
All right, Neil. Well, thanks for joining us again. I'm sure we'll see you again. Just remains for me to say, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.